Ambassador Jack Murphy stood in the observation lounge of Station Omega-7, watching the swirling nebula outside while mentally calculating how many ways this so-called peace summit could go catastrophically wrong. The answer, he'd determined after 3 days of preliminary meetings, was approximately 47. And that was just counting the ones that would kill everyone immediately. Historic moment, isn't it? He muttered to his reflection in the reinforced viewport. 5 galactic powers coming together to sign a treaty that every single one of them plans to violate before the ink dries. Assuming we use ink, do energy beings even understand the concept of ink? The Galactic Peace Summit was supposed to be humanity's big debut on the interstellar stage. First contact had happened only 2 years ago, and apparently the galaxy had been watching humans fumble around their little corner of space for decades, waiting to see if they'd blow themselves up or figure out faster than light travel first. Humanity had managed both, which seemed to impress absolutely no one. The conference room doors hissed open, revealing the other 4 ambassadors who would be participating in today's elaborate theater performance. First through the door was Ambassador Klex, representing the Zephyrian Hive Collective. Picture a praying mantis that had been hitting the gym for 6 months and developed an unhealthy obsession with Excel spreadsheets. Klex's compound eyes glittered with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for tax auditors discovering unreported income. Next came Ambassador Gorba of the Sylvan Coalition, a tree person who looked like someone had crossbred a redwood with a philosophy professor. Every sentence out of Gorba's bark-covered mouth was some sort of nature metaphor that sounded profound until you realized it basically meant we want your stuff. Ambassador Vex of the tidal dominion flowed in next, literally. The aquatic being moved in a contained water suit that somehow managed to make sloshing sounds seem menacing. Vex had the kind of attitude that suggested their species had invented arrogance and everyone else was just paying licensing fees. Finally, Ambassador Nyx of the quantum consciousness flickered into existence, appearing as a vaguely humanoid outline filled with shifting colors and patterns. Nyx communicated through color changes, which meant Jack had spent the last 3 days learning what amounted to galactic mood ring interpretation. Greetings, Ambassador Murphy, Klex chittered, mandibles clicking in what Jack had learned was either enthusiasm or hunger. With the Zephyrians, it was often the same thing. Are you prepared for this momentous occasion? Jack smiled the kind of smile diplomats perfected after years of practice. Oh, absolutely. Nothing says lasting peace like a treaty everyone knows is designed to fail spectacularly. The other ambassadors exchanged glances, or in Nyx's case, shifted to a confused purple-orange swirl. Apparently, human sarcasm didn't translate well across species barriers. This was going to be a long day. The treaty negotiation room had been designed by committee, which meant it looked like someone had thrown a furniture store into a blender and assembled the results based on suggestions from 5 different species with completely incompatible ideas about comfort. Jack sat in what was supposedly an ergonomic chair that felt like it had been designed for someone with 3 spines and a fundamental misunderstanding of human anatomy. Shall we begin the final review of terms? Klex announced, producing a data pad that probably contained more fine print than the terms of service for every social media platform combined. The Zephyrian Hive Collective is pleased to offer our advanced resource extraction technologies to benefit all member species. Jack bit back a laugh. He'd seen those resource extraction technologies in action during the preliminary briefings. They were essentially swarms of microscopic drones that could strip mine a planet down to the core in about 6 months. The Zephyrians were basically offering to eat everyone's homeworlds and call it a gift. How generous, Gorba rumbled, leaves rustling with what Jack was beginning to recognize as barely contained amusement. The Sylvan Coalition wishes to contribute our expertise in ecological optimization. We believe all worlds would benefit from our guidance in achieving proper environmental balance. Translation: the tree people wanted to terraform everyone else's planets into forest worlds. Jack had done his homework. Ecological optimization was Sylvan speak for we're going to turn your desert homeworld into a rainforest whether you like it or not. And if your species can't breathe the new atmosphere, well, That's just natural selection at work. Vex's water suit gurgled ominously. The tidal Dominion proposes establishing joint military cooperation zones throughout the galaxy. These zones would ensure rapid response to any threats against member species. Jack consulted his notes. Those cooperation zones just happen to form a perfect sphere around every other species' territory, with tidal Dominion fleets positioned at strategic choke points. It was like offering to help guard someone's house by building a fortress in their front yard and staffing it with people who'd already tried to rob them twice. Nix flickered through a series of colors that Jack's crash course in quantum communication had taught him meant something like enthusiastic agreement with ulterior motives. The energy being was proposing to help everyone upgrade their computer systems, which sounded helpful until you realized that quantum consciousness species existed partially in digital space. They were basically offering to move into everyone's internet and make themselves at home. And what does humanity offer? Klex asked, compound eyes focusing on Jack with uncomfortable intensity. Jack leaned back in his torture device of a chair. Oh, we're bringing something really revolutionary to the table. Something none of your species seem to have encountered before. The room went silent. Even Nick stopped flickering for a moment. Honesty, Jack said. We're actually planning to honor the treaty. You know, do what we say we're going to do. Apparently that's such a foreign concept that it's making everyone suspicious. Gorba's leaves rustled in what might have been laughter. Surely you must have some hidden agenda, Ambassador Murphy. No species agrees to interstellar treaties without some form of strategic advantage in mind. You're right, Jack admitted. Our hidden agenda is not getting blown up by any of you. Turns out, when you're the new kids on the Galactic block, your primary strategic goal is survival. Crazy concept, I know. Vex's suit made what Jack was pretty sure were derisive bubbling sounds. How refreshingly primitive. Hey, primitive works, Jack shrugged. We're still here, aren't we? Can't say the same for the last 3 species that tried negotiating with you guys. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, apparently bringing up the Crystalline Empire, the Void Walkers, and the Harmonic Collective was considered poor form. All 3 civilizations had signed similar treaties with the current galactic powers. All 3 were now extinct, their homeworlds either strip-mined, terraformed, flooded, or converted into server farms. But hey, correlation wasn't causation, right? 24 hours before the official treaty signing, Jack was beginning to suspect that Station Omega-7 had been constructed by the lowest bidder from each of the 5 galactic powers. The artificial gravity fluctuated every few hours, the food replicators produced meals that violated several laws of physics and at least one principle of good taste, and the life support system made sounds that reminded Jack uncomfortably of his grandfather's dying Buick. Chief Kowalski, status report, port. Jack called into his communicator as he made his way through corridors that seemed to have been designed by someone with a grudge against right angles. Well, Ambassador, came the reply in a voice that sounded like it had been aged in a barrel of gravel and bad decisions. The good news is I figured out why the gravity keeps cutting out. The bad news is it's because the Zephyrians hooked their mining drones into the station's power grid as a temporary measure about 6 months ago. Chief Engineer Rita Kowalski had been Jack's first choice for this mission, mostly because she was the only person he knew who could fix alien technology using nothing but duct tape, creative profanity, and sheer bloody-mindedness. She'd already proven invaluable by making their quarters actually habitable, which was more than any of the other delegations had managed. "Can you fix it?" Jack asked, stepping carefully around a section of floor that was definitely not supposed to be glowing that particular shade of green. Already did. Turns out Zephyrian engineering has the same fundamental flaw as everything else they do. They assume nobody's going to check their work. I've also taken the liberty of fixing the air recyclers, the water filtration system, and whatever the hell the Sylvans did to the temperature controls in Section 7. Jack paused. Wait, you fixed problems that weren't ours to fix? seemed like the right thing to do. Besides, if this station falls apart during the ceremony, we all die equally, and I've got plans for next weekend. This was exactly the kind of thing that was making the other delegations nervous. Humans kept doing helpful things without asking for anything in return, which apparently violated some fundamental principle of galactic diplomacy. Jack had caught Ambassador Klex trying to scan the repairs Rita had made, clearly convinced they contained some sort of hidden monitoring device or booby trap. Ambassador Murphy, came a voice behind him. Jack turned to see diplomat Tommy Chen approaching with the kind of expression that suggested he'd been spending quality time with their alien colleagues again. Tommy was Jack's cultural liaison and translator, a job that mostly involved turning Jack's sarcasm into something resembling actual diplomacy. He had the kind of patience that came from years of teaching kindergarten before joining the diplomatic corps, which turned out to be excellent preparation for dealing with galactic politics. "Let me guess," Jack said. "More complaints about our suspicious helpfulness." Ambassador Vex is convinced that Chief Kowalski's repairs to the water system are part of some elaborate plan to poison the station's water supply. Ambassador Gorba thinks we're introducing invasive microorganisms that will somehow terraform the entire station. Ambassador Nix has been flickering. It's paranoid orange for the last 3 hours, and Ambassador Klex keeps asking me to explain the true purpose of duct tape. Jack rubbed his temples. "Did you explain that duct tape's true purpose is fixing things that are broken?" I tried. Apparently, the concept of a simple, but effective solution that doesn't have 17 hidden agendas is so foreign to them that they're convinced it must be some sort of advanced psychological warfare. "Maybe it is," Jack mused. "Think about it, we show up, we fix their problems, we don't ask for anything in return, and they lose their minds trying to figure out our angle. That's got to be worth something in the grand scheme of galactic politics." Tommy considered this. "You know, that's either brilliant or completely insane. With our luck, it's probably both." As if summoned by the mention of impending disaster, the station's announcement system crackled to life with a voice that sounded like it had been processed through a garbage disposal and then translated by someone who'd learned standard through a correspondence course. "Attention all delegates. The treaty signing ceremony will commence in T-18 hours. All delegations are requested to prepare their ceremonial implements and traditional offerings. Please note that the use of weapons, toxins, explosives, or reality-altering devices during the ceremony is strictly prohibited, except where culturally necessary." Jack and Tommy exchanged glances. "Culturally necessary?" Tommy asked. "I'm not even going to ask," Jack replied. "But maybe we should make sure Rita has some extra duct tape on standby." The Great Hall of Station Omega-7 had been decorated for the occasion, which meant it looked like someone had exploded a diplomatic gift shop inside a meeting room, designed by a committee of interior decorators having a nervous breakdown. Banners from all 5 civilizations hung from the ceiling in a pattern that somehow managed to be insulting to everyone simultaneously, and the ceremonial table had been constructed from materials that represented each species' idea of formal and dignified, resulting in something that looked like a furniture accident waiting to happen. Jack stood at his designated position, wearing humanity's best attempt at ceremonial diplomatic attire, which basically meant his usual suit with some extra ribbons that Tommy had assured him were appropriately formal without being presumptuous. Around him, the other ambassadors had arrived in their full ceremonial regalia, which made the whole scene look like the universe's most expensive costume party. "Distinguished delegates," announced the station's master of ceremonies, a holographic construct that flickered with each word. "We gather today to witness the signing of the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Galactic Peace. This historic document represents a new era of unity among the 5 great powers of our galaxy." Jack caught Tommy's eye and mouthed "great powers" with the kind of expression usually reserved for discovering expired milk in your coffee. Tommy responded with a barely perceptible shrug that somehow conveyed both agreement and resignation. Ambassador Kleck stepped forward first, producing an ornate stylus that looked like it had been carved from the spine of something that had died screaming. The Zephyrian Hive Collective pledges its commitment to this sacred bond of peace and prosperity. The moment Klex touched the stylus to the treaty document, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Not the gentle, please be aware of a minor issue kind of alarms, but the everyone is probably going to die horribly variety that made your bones vibrate with existential dread. That's probably not good, Jack observed, just as the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an ominous red glow that made the ceremonial gathering look like a low-budget horror movie. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Jack could see small, metallic objects swarming around the station's hull like angry bees. Ah, Klex chittered nervously, it appears my mining drones have activated prematurely. This is unexpected. Unexpected? Vex's suit bubbled with what Jack was learning to recognize as aquatic fury. Your mechanical parasites are eating through the hull. The station shuddered as if something large had just taken a bite out of it, which Jack realized was probably exactly what had happened. Now, Gorba rustled, Leaves somehow managing to sound condescending even in a crisis. There's no need for panic. The natural order will provide a solution as flowing water finds its way around. Gorba's nature metaphor was cut short as vines began erupting through the floor, growing at a rate that violated several laws of biology and at least one principle of physics. The ecological optimization samples that the Sylvans had brought as a ceremonial gift were apparently designed to activate in response to stress. And if there was one thing the current situation had in abundance, it was stress. My systems, Nyx flickered in rapid, panic bursts of color. They're all connected. I cannot disconnect. The network is. Every screen display, and where is so? Electronic device in the room began flashing in chaotic patterns as Nyx's consciousness spread through the station's computer systems like a digital virus, having an anxiety attack. The Master of Ceremonies hologram began speaking in 17 different languages simultaneously while doing what might have been either a ceremonial dance or a system crash. Well, Jack said. As the ceremonial table collapsed under the weight of rapidly growing vegetation while water began flooding in from the lower levels and mining drones chewed through the ceiling, but this is going about as well as I expected. The treaty document, lovingly crafted on genuine Terran paper and signed by 1 out of 5 ambassadors, but was promptly sucked out through a hole in the hull that definitely hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. Tommy appeared at Jack's elbow, somehow managing to look calm, despite the fact that the room was rapidly becoming an ecological disaster zone. Should I activate the emergency protocols? Which ones? Jack asked, dodging a vine that seemed to have taken a personal interest in his ankles. The everyone tries to kill everyone else protocols, or the station explodes and we all die protocols. I was thinking more along the lines of the humans actually try to save everyone protocols. Jack grinned, the kind of smile that had gotten him into trouble since kindergarten. Now you're talking. Rita, you copy? His communicator crackled with static, then came alive with the sound of someone doing extremely creative things to the laws of physics. Copy, Ambassador. I'm in engineering, and let me tell you, this place makes a Rube Goldberg machine look like elegant design. How long do you need? How long can you give us? With enough duct tape and a complete disregard for manufacturer warranties? Maybe 20 minutes before this whole place becomes a very expensive fireworks display. Make it 30, Jack said, then turned to Tommy. Time to find out if our reputation for being annoyingly helpful is actually worth something. While the other 4 ambassadors stood around pointing appendages at each other and assigning blame for the rapidly accelerating disaster, Jack grabbed the station's emergency communications system, which was somehow still working despite the fact that half the station appeared to be either flooded, overgrown, or eaten by mining equipment. Attention all delegations and station personnel. he announced, his voice carrying over the chaos with the kind of authority that came from years of dealing with bureaucratic emergencies. "This is Ambassador Murphy. We have approximately 25 minutes before this station becomes a debris field. I'm implementing emergency evacuation procedures under Article 12 of the Galactic Emergency Response Protocols." Article 12. Ambassador Vex gurgled, water sloshing in agitation. "That gives emergency command authority to the species best equipped to handle the crisis," Jack finished. "Which, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, appears to be us." Tommy was already on his communicator, coordinating with the human delegation's support staff. "Chief Kowalski, what's the status on life support?" Rita's voice came through with the background sound of someone performing emergency surgery on machinery that was actively fighting back. "The good news is I've managed to isolate the main environmental systems from whatever the hell everyone else's technology is doing to each other. The bad news is that isolation won't last long. These systems were designed by committee, and that committee apparently included at least 2 species that wanted to kill each other." Jack turned to the other ambassadors, who were still standing in the middle of the chaos, looking like they were waiting for someone else to solve the problem. "Klex, can you recall your mining drones?" The insectoid ambassador's compound eyes flickered with what Jack had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of embarrassment. "I'm afraid not. They're operating under Autonomous Resource Acquisition Protocol 7. Once activated, they continue until they've processed all available materials or receive a direct neural override. And you can't give them a neural override because the override transmitter is located in the section of the station they've already consumed." Jack stared at Klex for a moment. "You designed mining drones that can only be stopped by equipment located in the area they're actively destroying? It seemed efficient at the time." "Right. Gorba, can you control the plant growth?" The tree person rustled in what might have been botanical sheepishness. "The seedlings were designed to establish ecological balance through rapid environmental integration. They respond only to natural life cycle indicators, which means they'll stop growing when they achieve perfect ecosystem equilibrium." "And how long does that take?" "Approximately 47 standard years." Jack rubbed his temples. "Vex, please tell me you can do something about the flooding." "The cleansing waters flow according to the ancient patterns of the tide," Vex replied in the kind of tone that suggested this was supposed to be profound. "They cannot be recalled until the ritual purification is complete." "How long?" 6 to 8 hours, depending on the spiritual impurities present." Jack looked at Nix, who was flickering through colors that probably represented every form of digital panic attack possible. "Let me guess. You can't disconnect from the station's systems?" Nix pulsed a resigned shade of blue-gray. "My consciousness has become distributed across 17 different computing architectures, none of which are compatible with each other. Attempting to disconnect would likely result in permanent fragmentation of my essential self. So you're stuck here until someone fixes the computers." "Essentially, yes." Jack activated his communicator again. "Rita, please tell me you have some good news." "Define good news." "I've managed to jury-rig a temporary solution using spare parts from all 4 alien technologies, 3 rolls of duct tape, and a universal adapter I built out of what used to be a ceremonial tea service. The life support will hold. But we need to evacuate everyone to a stable section of the station." "Which section is stable?" "Turns out, building things to actually work instead of looking impressive has its advantages." Tommy was already coordinating the evacuation, speaking to each delegation in their preferred communication style while simultaneously updating the station's emergency services and keeping track of which sections were still structurally sound. Jack watched him work and realized that humanity's real advantage wasn't superior technology or advanced weapons, it was the ability to actually cooperate during a crisis instead of standing around arguing about whose fault everything was. "All right, people. Jack announced, "Here's what's going to happen. We're moving everyone to the human delegation quarters, which apparently are the only parts of this station that aren't currently being destroyed by your ceremonial gifts. Chief Kowalski will coordinate repairs while we figure out how to shut down the various apocalypses you've all accidentally triggered." "This is highly irregular," Klex protested. "The treaty negotiations should be conducted in neutral territory." "The treaty document is currently somewhere in interstellar space," Jack pointed out, "along with most of Section 12. I think we're a little past worrying about irregular procedures." As they made their way through corridors that were rapidly becoming more obstacle course than hallway, Jack couldn't help but notice that the other species were actually cooperating for the first time since the negotiations had begun. Nothing like imminent death to bring people together. "You know," Tommy said quietly as they helped Ambassador Nix navigate around a particularly aggressive vine, "this is probably the most successful diplomatic mission humanity has ever conducted." "How do you figure?" "We're the only ones anyone trusts to fix the mess." Jack considered this as they reached the human quarters, where Rita had somehow managed to create a stable environment using nothing but human engineering and sheer stubbornness. "You might be right. Too bad we'll probably all be dead before we can put that on our resumes." 6 months later, Jack found himself in a nearly identical situation, standing in another conference room and preparing to sign another treaty. The main differences were that this conference room was located on humanity's newest space station, the coffee was actually drinkable, and nobody was trying to accidentally destroy the building with their ceremonial gifts. Station Harmony, a name that Tommy had suggested and everyone else had agreed to mainly because they were too tired to argue, represented humanity's first major contribution to galactic infrastructure. It had been built using a revolutionary new design philosophy that Jack privately called making things that actually work, and it featured such advanced concepts as life support systems that don't randomly fail and gravity that stays consistently in one direction. "I still can't believe we're doing this again," Jack muttered to Tommy as they reviewed the new treaty documents. These were printed on actual paper, because everyone had agreed that human technology was surprisingly reliable, even if it seemed primitive by galactic standards. "Think of it as a learning experience," Tommy replied. "Besides, look how much progress we've made." Jack glanced around the room at their fellow ambassadors. Klex was examining the conference table's construction with obvious approval. It was made from actual wood and showed no signs of being about to consume itself or anyone sitting at it. Gorba was enjoying the potted plants that decorated the room, which were guaranteed to be non-sentient and definitely not going to terraform anything. Vex's water suit displayed relaxed, contented bubbling patterns, and Nix flickered in calm, steady colors. The Murphy Doctrine, as the new treaty framework had come to be known, was based on 3 simple principles that Jack had developed during the Great Station Omega-7 disaster. Assume everyone is lying, prepare for everything to go wrong, but help anyway. Article 1, Jack read aloud from the treaty document. All signatory species acknowledge that they probably have hidden agendas and agree to be generally suspicious of each other while still working together toward common goals. Article 2, continued Ambassador Klex, all joint projects will be designed with the assumption that something will go catastrophically wrong, and backup systems will be implemented accordingly. Article 3, Gorba rustled approvingly. Despite mutual suspicion and inevitable problems, all signatory species agree to actually help each other when things go badly, because apparently the humans are the only ones who figured out that everyone dying is bad for business. Ambassador Vex's suit gurgled in what Jack had learned was aquatic laughter. "I must admit, Ambassador Murphy, your species' approach to diplomacy is refreshingly direct." "We call it the not getting everyone killed approach," Jack replied. "It's served us well so far." Nix flickered through a pattern of colors that Tommy's translation guide indicated meant something like amused appreciation with undertones of respect. The energy being had spent the last 6 months helping to design the new station's computer systems, and had apparently discovered that working with technology designed by people who expected it to function properly was a pleasant change of pace. There is one matter we should address, Ambassador Gorba said, leaves rustling with barely contained amusement. Each of our governments has instructed us to negotiate exclusive partnerships with humanity. Jack blinked. Exclusive partnerships? It appears, Klex chittered, that word of your species' competence has spread throughout the galaxy. Everyone wants to be humanity's special friend. And nobody wants to be left out, Vex added, because the last time species tried to compete against humans instead of working with them, the humans ended up being the only ones not trying to kill each other. Jack looked around the table at 4 of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, all of whom were essentially admitting that they needed humanity to teach them how to not be terrible to each other. It was either the most diplomatically successful moment in human history, or the most terrifying indication of how messed up galactic politics really were. Probably both. Well, Jack said, picking up his pen, I guess we better sign this thing before one of you accidentally destroys the station again. As he signed his name to the Treaty of Reasonable Expectations and Mutual Crisis Management, Jack couldn't help but smile. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had needed the newest, most primitive species to teach them the revolutionary concept of actually helping each other. You know, he said to Tommy as the ceremony concluded without any explosions, invasive plant growth, or reality-altering computer viruses, but I have a feeling the next treaty is going to be even more interesting. Why's that? Because now everyone knows we're the ones who keep everything from falling apart. Tommy considered this. Think we can handle the responsibility? Jack looked out the viewport at the swirling stars beyond, then back at the room full of alien diplomats who were all trying to figure out how to be humanity's best friend without stabbing each other in the back. Well, he said, we've made it this far without blowing up the galaxy. I figure that gives us pretty good odds. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, blissfully unaware that the fate of galactic civilization had just been entrusted to a species that had invented duct tape and considered that a significant technological achievement. Somehow, that seemed about right.